Sunday then, Spurs 2, Chelsea 0. And, let's talk about that game, Daniel, it was unfair of Carl to bring up your widely shared view that it might be in some way detrimental to Spurs not having Antonio Conte on the sideline. How wrong we all were about that. That's 4 for 4 for Christian Stellini as the kind of sideline boss. And if you take it back to Inter days, I think it's 6 for 6. I think he had a couple there as well.
I was secretly a Christian Stellini hype man. And I was just kind of, it was all a ruse.
So what? I mean, is that just a quirk of numbers, or is there something to that?
Yeah, I think it's just a quirk of numbers.
Is it?
Yeah, I think.
So when Conte was back for the game in the middle, was at San Siro, they went and lost to not the world's most irresistible team, Milan.
No, agreed. But I don't think that Christian Stellini, how these things work is not that Christian Stellini comes in with his own tactics Bible and says, right, forget everything else we've done the last few weeks. We're going to do it differently now. There might be something in that, a change is as good as a rest.
Right.
But I don't think in terms of how Tottenham played. I mean, reality is that was an absolute archetypal Antonio Conte Tottenham performance in that they were stunted in the first half to the point that it felt deliberate, didn't have a shot on target. They were efficient in attack when they did go forward in the second half, scored 2 of their 3 shots on target. Are a second half team because their goal difference in the first half is -3 and it's +14, I think, in the second half. So actually, it was very Conte. It's just that they won, and they do tend to beat Chelsea at the moment because Chelsea are not very good.
Well, I mean, historically, they don't tend to beat Chelsea. And I think that's a big bugbear for Chelsea supporters after the game, the fact that their players look so listless.
This Chelsea. Tottenham are competent at the moment, particularly in the second half. Chelsea are worlds away from competence. That to me was the conclusion of the game. I mean, I only saw highlights. Sash saw it all, but from the highlights I watched, I think that's pretty much it.
Sash?
Well, I think so. Potter tactically, I think he tried to play effectively 5 at the back with Ziyech trying to cover the right flank. I think broadly that did not work because Ziyech a couple of times was basically when sliding down, falling down the midfield where there was attack developing on the left of someone like, say, Ben Davies. I think Spurs purposefully targeted that. Had Richarlison going in there. They had Højbjerg on that side as well. And Ben Davies was very, very progressive. So after the first maybe 10, 12 minutes when Chelsea were okay-ish going forwards, I think the structure got a little bit broken. And Spurs effectively pushed them back. And because one of those Ziyech errors is why Thiago Silva got injured, because he got injured, I think, tackling Kane. And after that, the problem with Chelsea was, look at this Chelsea team now. They concede one, they're done. I mean, and they have absolutely no way of scoring. They in the second half, I think created nothing. They put Mudryk on with 10 minutes to go, and you think, oh yeah, this guy's going to get behind Emerson Royal. I think he maybe did it half a time, and then Royal just stood off, and then he just pumped crosses in. At that point, they put Aubameyang and obviously Havertz in there, but it's the entire Spurs team.
Really happy to come on.
Exactly. I mean, they were all delighted to be there, and the entire Spurs team was in their box. So it's like it seems to be sort of disconnect in what what Potter is trying to do there. Spoke to Potter after the game, and to be honest, I don't know. He didn't really have anything to say about the fact they're not scoring any goals. This is 1 goal in 6 games now. It's 2 wins in I think 15.
15, yeah.
And this is the problem. Once they go behind, that's it. I mean, and I also spoke to Foster after the game as well, who I think, again, Fraser Foster, we all know he's a big guy and he's a unit, and he doesn't get down very well.
No.
They didn't test him with that at all. And it's just like, guys, think about what you're facing here. And this was the problem. So Chelsea effectively melted and wilted away, and I think that's a big worry.
The numbers are pretty damning. Only 2 shots on target all game, despite having 59% possession, 1 win in 11, or 2, as you say, in their last 15. They can't defend. They've now stopped scoring as well. No one, indeed, since the start of November has scored fewer goals in the entire Premier League than Chelsea have. I think it's just 6, isn't it? They're 10th at the moment on 31 points. They're only goal difference outside the bottom half of the table. They're 14 points away from the top 4. They're only 10 off relegation, which sounds not desperately relevant, but the way this run is going. So, okay, question from Daniel Arvidsson. Make the case for keeping Potter till next season versus sacking him right now. Who's for keeping him till next season? And who's for sacking him right now?
It's hard.
It's hard.
If you were Todd Bowley, what would you be doing this morning?
I mean,
if I was Todd Bowley, I think I'd look at what happens in the Champions League, because the league season is dead. They're going to be in mid-table. On the one hand, it could be an opportunity because he could try different things and then see how they work out without much league table pressure. But I think fundamentally, if they lose to Dortmund, I think Bowley could pull the trigger.
I think if you're Todd Bowley and you went to this expense to recruit Graham Potter and others, you'd hope Todd Bowley has an advisor that tells you it's much easier to. They say it's much easier to replace your manager than replace. Last season on the Graham Potter, he often used the word alignment. He said we're all aligned. We're working to a clear plan. It's not just the players, it's the manager, it's the people up top, and there is zero alignment in this Chelsea team. I am watching. Why I made that noise when Sasha mentioned Hakim Ziyech. Ziyech would have been a PSG player if it wasn't for the paperwork. And he's not only featuring games, but starting games. And you're going, but why? We know Hakim Ziyech's strengths and weaknesses as a Premier League player at this point in time. He offers very little off the ball, and yet here he is. It's like going to games with one arm tied behind your back. I have very big questions as to Kai Havertz's suitability to lead the line for a team that wants to be in the Champions League.
Well, leading, I think it might be a key word. Sasha, what did you make of Chelsea's reaction in what presumably is a keenly felt fixture for them?
Well, A, it's keenly felt. B, this is a Champions League. This was very, very relevant to the race for the fourth. This is for them to be in it. And I think once Thiago Silva is off, there is no one else taking responsibility. I mean, it's quite hard to take responsibility, but the structure of the game wasn't helped by the manager. The structure of the game wasn't helped by the fact there was Ziyech, which I thought there was a big hole there, and it took him an hour to replace him. The structure of the game isn't helped by the fact that the Chelsea tried to play through Enzo Fernandez, I think, a little bit too much, so it was lopsided. The way he switched around the three behind the front man also was ineffective. Just the whole thing wasn't great. And also, I think I would say with Kepa as well. Kepa doesn't come covering himself a glory for the first goal, I think. The hands are not in the right place. So the whole... And it's just... They just wilted. I would go back to that. They just wilted. There was no one coming back for them. And I think it's also a function of the team that doesn't score, that knows, we've conceded, and that's it.
Yeah, well, what a way to concede that Oliver Skip goal. Hey, Daniel.
Yeah, I mean, we've just talked about an EFL Cup final in which we agree that it was decided kind of by millimetres and fine margins. The differences between a team looking like they're playing really badly and a team looking like they're playing pretty competently is not that much, and it comes down to little things like the cohesion between players, and they've bought loads, the fit of the manager and the squad, and there is none, the toxic mood behind the scenes, and we heard from Potter himself last week that he's had death threats towards his children. There's no morale behind the scenes, there's no positivity behind the scenes, and a team can very quickly look very ordinary by doing that, and even worse than ordinary. And I don't see any comeback from that. The mood amongst both online and matchday fans is that this isn't going to change. Chelsea tried to do this when they appointed Lampard and said, right, this is going to be our new holistic era, and they had not much change there, and Lampard still struggled to make a cohesive squad when the players started to come in second season. Potter's doing that with like 8 expensive new signings, none of them who really know whether they're going to be there in Chelsea in 2 years' time, apart from they've got a 10-year contract. None of them really know if they're actually part of Potter's plans, and none of them really now know what Potter's plan even is. So how is that ever going to work?
All right. Skip's goal, though, eh? Hey, Sash.
It was. I was still in the media center, and I kind of.
Was it like 20 seconds? Sorry,
it was
seconds
18. I looked at 18 seconds, and it came immediately after Kulusevski very nicely played in Emerson Royale, and so that's why it made me turn to one of the 15 million screens they have in the media center. Next thing I see is Skip steaming in, and I think. Again, I think it's a moment of skill to open up Chelsea defense from Kulusevski, but at the same time, I think Chelsea have the chance to clear. They don't clear. And then they just don't reset themselves for the second attempt.
Right. What about the second goal? Harry Kane, he's got a bit of a track record of scoring goals. Might he not be worth marking on a corner?
Yes, very much so. This is...
It's a good flick from Dyer, to be fair.
Yes,
it's a good flick from Dyer.
But and it is, it's Harry Kane, and Harry Kane has a way of magiking up that extra millimetre of positioning where other strikers cannot. Spurs were as good as Chelsea were bad, and this was a win that Tottenham needed to re-establish themselves, seeds of growth for their top 4 race at a time where Newcastle appear to may or not be having a wobble, particularly in terms of goal scoring. But this Chelsea team are just bizarre. I mean, Koulibaly, he's not the Koulibaly we saw in Serie A, was he? It's remarkable. And then you go, well, if Koulibaly's not playing this, what? You've got a perfectly good Benoit Badiashile on your bench who didn't come off, and maybe he was injured, maybe he was 100% that. But what are we doing here?
Graham Potter afterwards referencing the fact that he'd watched Arsenal, the All or Nothing documentary, and the moments when Arsenal fans wanted Arteta out and he was in a slump and it's all come good. Is that a fair parallel to draw? Are you with nobody?
I don't think he should be talking about that. And I understand obviously everyone understands why he's doing it, but I think it's a bad move from Potter because that is proper stroke-clutching territory. And I don't think it sends a very bad message, to be honest.
Arsenal didn't have a recent history of sacking managers, appointing them, and then that manager winning the Champions League very quickly. So that goes against him.
I think more than one Arsenal fan would admit that some of the bad days under Arteta was helped slightly by the fact that some of those really bad games were behind closed doors. So you don't get the audio visual of a man being booed as he walks back down the tunnel, and it looks like he's walking towards.
But the point that if you give even a manager who appears to be in the worst of slumps time, he can turn it around.
Possibly.
Arsenal also had the youngest team in the Premier League, and Chelsea have the most expensive and one of the oldest teams in the Premier League.
And also, as a Chelsea manager, you should not be bringing up what the Arsenal manager is doing unless you're roundly booing him and saying, "Ha ha, we beat him." Graham Potter is a thoroughly decent man, and I worry he's got into the awkward Roy Hodgson-esque situation where he's talking too much for a job that seems slightly too big for him.
Right.
And he's...
I think Potter is a very normal guy. And maybe that is his problem at Chelsea. You cannot be normal at Chelsea as a manager of Chelsea. I don't think you can. You have to have a little bit of crazy like Tuchel. You have to have a bit of showmanship like Mourinho. You just have to be more. I think the only person who can in at Chelsea and be normal is someone like Hiddink when he's doing like an interim job. Everybody else is just like you cannot approach Chelsea job as a rational man. I don't think.
Right. That's worrying. Who's available? Should they decide that enough is enough?
There's a fine German former Champions League winning manager who knows the Wi-Fi password at Cobham that they could probably hire.
Klopp? Yeah. The kind of toddler Bowley auto call here is to appoint Mourinho over the summer, isn't it? That's like the dream Chelsea narrative. That would be classic. Everything I've heard about Todd Bowley suggests that he would think Jose Mourinho is a good idea. So that would be very funny. But I mean, Zidane is a kind of obvious choice if Pochettino doesn't want it. But there aren't that many now, are there, of those managers who are willing to risk being sacked in 15 months by Chelsea.
Also, my question would be like some of those expensively assembled players. When are they going to start making noises about being annoyed, about not playing, about the tactics? This will happen. If they carry on like this, if they carry on losing and not scoring.
The Totally Football Show podcast is available 3 times a week, bringing you all the football news you could reasonably be expected to care about. We've got views, we've got stats, we've got analysis, we've got some of the best football writers around, and the whole thing is absolutely free. So have a listen on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or all the usual places by clicking on the link below.